Hello and welcome to this instructional video about the initial aircraft inspection and cockpit setup. I'm really happy to share this video with you all, as I was there a couple of years ago as well in the States doing my initial, and I found that it was quite hard to figure out how to implement Part B, the SOPs, in the sim, as the instructors didn't really know our SOPs, and I already said to myself at that time, I want to make a video about the whole setup, so that for the next generation everything will be going smooth, and once you come to the LIFES, the training in Europe, that you already know how to do things. And talk about training, we have a great team on our Latitude. First of all, Sach, he's our fleet program manager, and he's very open to conversations and questions if you have any. Of course, we have Lieven, he's our senior training captain. Basically, he's our external brain. He knows everything about the aircraft, everything about performance, and he's also really helpful if you have any questions or doubts or wonder how things work. Then we have Steven, he's our senior standards captain. He will probably do your base check when you come back to Europe for your first flight on the Latitude. And he's also the one who will in the future hopefully get Part B written a bit more smooth and more understandable. Of course, I will do my bit. I'm a line trainer myself, and I'm running the NGE Stuff website, ngestuff.com website, also purely made to make life easier, to find the links easier, and also like with the instructional video here. So you don't have to really go that deep into the material trying to figure it out yourself. We also have Ruud, he's our standards captain, and once you fly with him after your LIFES, I'm pretty sure that he will make sure you know Part B inside out. Plus, it's always really nice to do a tour with one of those trainers, Ruud or any other standard trainers, as you always know you read Part B and you think you got it, and then there are small letters or small items here and there, and these guys will just, without having you read it 10 times, they will explain and put you on the right path. I also enjoy doing a tour with these guys, as I'm getting more standard and better as well. Well, you learn every day something. So, talk about learning. I have set up 3 videos for the initial aircraft inspection. First, I got the poster, mock-up I like to call it, and I will run through the cockpit setup as our flow. And I have another video which is live footage. I'm doing a flight from Biggin Hill to Barcelona, and in this flight I will show you how I set up the cockpit, but also what I do before that, the paperwork, how to fill it in, basically the whole flight preparation. One of the things with the initial aircraft inspection is that once you come online, a LIFES program, maybe you do it 1 hour, a cockpit setup, and then in a line check or during any other training, nobody will really ask you for it anymore. And in the sim, you haven't really trained for it. That's why I think it's quite important to know this video and know how we really want you to do the setup. There's another video of the walk around, and of course you've done a walk around in the States as well, maybe a walk around with the base check. This video goes a little bit more in depth about what the equipment is, and maybe a little bit beyond a normal walk around, but it also gives you a little idea if you open up things what you're actually looking at and what you're seeing. So about this part, the first part, the reason why I put it together is because Part B has 4 different checklists and checks to do. First of all, Part B writes up the initial aircraft inspection, which is a big inspection. Now this part is not a checklist and it's not a flow, it's an inspection. Meaning you're a little bit flexible on when to do it and how to do it. You don't really have to follow it one step after the other. It is not a flow where you follow it as written, so you're flexible with it. Then you have the power-up flow, which is a bit of a zigzag pattern, and you have the power-up checklist, which doesn't really match with the power up flow. So if you try to figure out, okay, I'm going to start with the power up flow and then I have the checklist which doesn't really match it, you're getting into question marks from how do I do this? And to make life worse, we also have cockpit switches and buttons expanded checklist in the back, which somewhere fits into the power up checklist, which has items that also covers or is covered in initial aircraft inspection and is also covered in the power up flow. So how to make life easy? Well, because the initial aircraft inspection is not a flow nor a checklist, you can actually amend that checklist, put the power up flow and the cockpit switches and buttons together with the initial aircraft inspection. So you're legal with Part B, legal with the flows, and you cover basically everything. So let me explain that in the video. So what you do first after you have done the emergency equipment in a cockpit is you go to the cockpit, check the circuit breakers, check the power levers idle, check the flaps up. When you've done a small part of the walk around, you see the flaps are up, so you want to check if the flap selector is also up. And then you turn the emergency lights to arm. Now, I understand that in the power up flow, it first wants you to turn the battery on. So I want to make sure that this differentiation you understand. If you turn them to arm with the battery on, the lights will remain off. So you actually have this one turned on. In this flow, because the battery is still off, you can turn it to arm and you can actually check the lights. They're all burning. And you leave it at arm. And then you go down, check your standby power, hold it to test for 10 seconds, check the green light and turn it to on. Check the avionic buttons are in. Some people at night like to turn them off. This helps with the battery power, and it also saves you with all the noise and the sounds in the background. We want to check if they're both in and then turn the batteries on. At that time, screens are being booted up. The new machines, it takes only 5 or 10 seconds. The older machines, it might take 15-20 seconds. So you got some time now to play around with things. So in that time, normally what I like to do is your rudder pedals, put your rudder pedals at the length you want. For me, I'm 2 meters tall, so I like to have them all the way in the back, quite easy. And you have on top 3 spheres, and you want to align them so you only see 2. So at that moment you know the seat is already comfortable the way you like it. Then you go to the oxygen mask, you check the oxygen. Basically you want to press the mic selector to mask. You want to get the yoke intercom to outboard. Press the box oxygen test and deplete the oxygen. So you see initially the yellow light, and it's actually not a light, the yellow cross, and it will go out. And then while holding it, you press the test button on the mask and the yellow will come back and you hear the sound over the speaker. Then you turn it back off, put this into the middle position, and then you go to the cockpit buttons and switches flow, which is basically looking at all the switches, 12 o'clock up. Everything should be pointing 12 o'clock up, except for the APU, because you haven't started the APU yet, so that will be in off position. And the ELT, which is of course in the arm position, you don't want to have it up either. And you go up, and with the lights, you already turn the seatbelt on, and you check if your aux, flood and panel lights are set correctly, day and night. At this time, the screens will be booted up. You can start a timer for 3 minutes. Now with experience, the 3-minute mark will be around the time when you work with a flight plan, so then you don't have to time anymore for the 3 minutes. But initially you want to see how fast you are, so you don't bust the 3-minute limit on Part B. It means you have to wait for the aux pump to be used or starting the APU after the 3 minutes. Then we come to the ICAS. What you want to do is you want to go down, check the fuel, how much you have for refueling. we have a figure, say if you want to fuel 2,000 pounds, you multiply that by 0.58, so you get the amount in liters. And you go down, you check the hydraulic volume. Volume should be 120 cubic inch or more. You want to check this actually because there's no CAS message telling you if it's less. And that's also part B, that you have to check that. Check of course the battery voltage. If it's below 23, it gets into the yellow. That means you have to get on GPU and charge the batteries. Above, you're still able to start the APU. And you want to check the CAS messages, see if there's anything special on there that will prohibit you from actually flying. And then you come towards the GTC. Now there are 5 things you want to do at the GTC. You want to select the profile to NetJets. You want to set the transponder to standby. And you want to put your call sign of course in. On the right side you want to turn the ACARS flight plan on and request flight plan. You want to select Connex weather, 15 minutes, and then send immediate request. And then you want to select the summary page to come up here. And the summary page will show you the oxygen quantity and all the tests that's being performed. Also, when you do the trim test later on, you can check if it's out of limit and give you an amber message. Oxygen, if it's in the green, perfect. If it's in the black, you can still fly, but you have to go into the AFM. And there's a table with our 77 cubic inch oxygen bottle. You can see with the amount of passengers how long you can actually fly. So those are the 5 things you do with the GTC. And then it's time to do the initialization. The initialization is basically you run through a Jepson charge, the weight and balance, the flight plan and the performance, and you do all the system tests. Now this is a bit difficult to explain on a mock-up, so with the live footage in another video it will be clearer and more easy to understand. So once you start with the flight plan, you know 3 minutes are about up. That means you can start the APU and you can charge the batteries. To start the APU, you turn the APU switch to on, check the red flash, check the APU numbers are in the green, and check the APU battery voltage and amps are also in the green. And you press select or start and you start the APU up. And once the APU is running, you want to check if the bus tie is closed. Internal you can put on. Now there's a note in the system that says 275 amps or less you can put things on. However, the first minute you can use a lot more voltage. There's like a buffer. So the 275 amps only counts after the 1 minute mark. So there's no problem if you can actually turn on the interior. You will get a CAS message, or actually the numbers will get amber if you go over that limit. So the interior on, you can choose to turn the APU bleed on, or even max cool in the winter, or sorry, in the summer. And you can use the crossfeed to balance out the fuel. Crossfeed is really nice because we cannot transfer the fuel, so you definitely want to make use of that feature to balance the fuel now. So once the APU has been started, you complete the GTC setup. You want to do all the checks and accept the initialization page. And then once you've completed the GTC, you continue with the trim checks. So on the video, live footage video, I will show you exactly how to do the trim checks. But you start with the stabilizer trim, the secondary trim, and you want to set, once you're finished with the trims, and also you want to do your colleague's side trim, you want to set it to -7.4. Now this is to actually check the stabilizer trim tab, which is on the back side. So not the front side, but the back side. This tab does a couple of things. One of them, if you fly manually with flap 2 to full, it will actually help you with the control forces by trimming the trim tab. and also the mark trim. At Mach 0.76 the shockwave starts on the wing, meaning you lose a little bit of lift. That means you can compensate this by using the mark trim. Once completed, you come down, you do the aileron trim, you do the rudder trim, you go to the cockpit voice recorder, you test by pressing it. Auxiliary pump to set the parking brake. Want to make sure that the CAS message says parking brake on. And then you come up and you turn the pedal static on. And once you turn them off, you see that the CAS message of the pedal static is on top. And then you go to the autopilot. Basically you turn off the lock, yaw dampener on first, and then autopilot. Always yaw dampener first before autopilot. You test if it's working, press disconnect, and set it back to lock. And then you want to go up to the lights, turn them all on, and you go into the GTC and turn the beacon on and ask your colleague to check outside if the lights are actually working. It also reminds you from, okay, there are more lights in the cockpit. There's the emergency light behind your seat. And at this time, because you have the interior on, you can check if it's actually charging or not. You want to check if it's yellow or green. If it's red, it cannot find the flashlight. And once you're there in the back, you can also go to the clarity screen to set up the cabin. So basically you want to set boarding and you want to turn on the hot water. This is for hand wash in the toilet. Once completed with the external, all the lights go off and you want to set the trim back to what you have on the toll card, -3 point something. And then it's time to set the screens up. Now, what I like to do is again 5 things. Makes it for me easy to remember. First is to set the screens up on top. It means Jeppesen chart, summary page, electric page and the fuel page. And once I've done that, I like to get my iPad ready and basically show the flight. So in this case, I'm preparing for a flight from Biggin Hill to Barcelona. So for the briefing, I have the whole map view. I can show my colleague, okay, this is where the weather is, this is how it moves, so we immediately know also what the wind is, where to watch out for turbulence. It's nice for your colleague also to give the brief to the passengers where the turbulence is, for example. And also you use the iPad for the Jeppesen briefings. Officially we're not legal yet to use the screens, even though they do work, a lot of colleagues do brief from them, but for legal purposes we still have to use the iPad to brief the Jeppesen charts. So that's the first, set up the screens. Second is in the GTC, you want to set up how you like the map mode. For me, I like the map mode with no text, so I like the big screen. But everybody has their own preferences, you can play around with it. I like the bird's eye view, everything simple and open. I also go into the map mode and select waypoints, NDB VORs to 15 nautical miles. For the simple reason is that when I go beyond 15 nautical miles in the zoom, everything disappears and I only see the flight plan. And below I see the points. So in the air, if ATC gives you a direct, you can actually select 15 nautical miles on the range and find the point that they're clearing you to. It sometimes helps with the flight. Also I like the rails, I like the roads, and it's something, it will come on the line when you get used to the machine and you can set up the things the way you like it. Now with the profile NetJets, most of the things are already set up. But this profile with a vertical of the 15 nautical miles or any other range or the cities, that's something personal. You have to set it up yourself. And the same thing counts for the V-bars or the crossbars and some other features. You will find out later on, like what you have here in the rows, do you want the HSI map or do you want nothing? I personally want to have a simple and have nothing. At that time you can also set up the big chart for the departure by setting on the right side the lag page of the flight plan, and here I will show you this on the live footage, the map screen. On this GTC you can set up all the frequencies for the departure, such as the departure frequency in the standby and 1215 in the active. Also, you want to make sure that the speaker is off, set the radios, check if the DME is not in the hold. One of the problems with this machine is if you fly in Germany, some airports want you have to put the DME in a hold. And this means that on the next flight, even the next day, the system still remembers that the DME is in a hold, so it doesn't automatically get it out of the hold. That means you have to go in it and check if the hold is there and get it out. Also things like the wind factor you can set here. I like wind option 3 because it gives you an arrow where the wind is coming from, but you also have other options to know immediately what your crosswind is, etc. And then once you have completed this, it's time to do a glass briefing or a glass setup. Basically means you set by pressing the toggle button the 10-degree pitch bar. You want to select the 180 knots speed, the heading to initial runway heading. You want to select the baro minimum to your acceleration altitude engine out. And initial altitude for the SID, you minus 100, and that's a nice setup as well. And check, of course, with the ATIS. You can do that with the ACARS on the right side if the airport has the ATIS. If not, of course, you listen out to the ATIS. One of the nice features here is you press and hold, and then it comes with a menu, and you select nearest, and then you find your airport, and it immediately finds the ATIS frequency, and you select transfer, so you have the ATIS here, so you don't even have to look at Jefferson chart anymore. And once you have the ATIS, you check, of course, the QNH and set it all 3 times. Now with this machine, make sure that it's less than 10 knots tailwind. If it is more, you have to turn the aircraft around. So those are the 5 screens set up. And then it's time to do the checklist, the power-up checklist. Because everything is now prepared, you're ready for a briefing. And it's time to make sure that you've thinked of all the items. So once you've completed the checklist, and the cabin is ready, passengers on board, your colleague has done the passenger briefing, it's time to give your colleague a briefing. Now, personally, it's on the NGE website. I have a little card to give the briefing, and I will go you with this more in detail with the live footage. But I just run through the items. You can have a little acronym. Some people use aircraft status, NOTAMs, weather, performance, and then the brief. Other people use just their own made-up thing. As long as it complies with Part A, that you do most of the items, if not all the items on Part A. I use a little checklist myself, just to make sure I cover everything. If it's the first flight of the tour, you also want to give them the emergency briefing. And once you have the clearance received, you can select FMS, you set the SID altitude, and you want to turn on the PAX safety when the startup clearance is received. Of course, with the normal clearance, you also want to select nav. So then everything is set up. And the glass briefing itself is quite easy. You can only do the glass briefing once the clearance has been received and you're both in the cockpit. And the glass is nothing else. You make a little circle around, you're looking at the speeds. You will see dashes, but this is normal. You can look up on this screen if you want with the performance the speeds, or you brief what has been set on the told card and you've seen that it's already been sent. The speed you set here, the 180 knots, if you do fly Biggin Hill, for example, then it can be set to 185 knots, but standard is 180 knots. You brief the flight director modes, you brief the initial altitude, you brief, you can do an RVSM check all the altitudes, QNH, any CAS messages which is worthwhile mentioning, and initial turn. And that completes the glass briefing. And at that time, when you have a startup clearance, you can also ask for the startup checklist. That completes the initial aircraft inspection and cockpit switches and buttons, flows. And as you can see, this basically puts all the 4 checklists we have into one flow. And to recap, it's very simple. The first actual item is you go look down. Second flow is you do all the cockpit switches and go up. Third flow is you go down and check the CAS messages and go to the GTC and set up the GTC. The fourth flow is you go all the trims and all the items here, and again you go up. The fifth is actually setting up the screens and prepare yourself for the briefing. And the sixth is actually doing the glass. So I hope this video will be helpful for you guys in the States. I wish you all the best and a lot of fun with the training. I'm sure once you go onto the line with one of us, you're going to have a lot of fun flying it. I'm really happy with the machine, as I said. You know, pressurization being excellent. You don't feel tired anymore. You don't have to worry about the cargo space. You have a big area in the back where you can put pretty much everything in. And well, I cannot stand up in the cockpit or in the cabin because I'm 2 meters tall, but hopefully you guys are a little bit smaller, so you have no problem in standing up as well. And yeah, it's a great machine, great team. I'm sure you're going to love it. So thank you for listening, and hope you all the best.